young thinkers. It's me, Professor Punzworth, your bow-tie-wearing, Constitution-caring, pun-sharing pal. And today, we're diving into a topic that's more organized than my sock drawer. We're talking about how the U.S. government works. Now, before you yawn like a sleepy senator, stick with me, because understanding government isn't just smart, it's capital. You know, like the U.S. Capitol. Let's cast our vote for knowledge and get started. First up, what even is a government? A government is a group of people who make rules, enforce those rules, and settle arguments about the rules. It's kind of like a teacher, a hall monitor, and a referee all rolled into one, but with a lot more paperwork. In the United States, our government was created by a big old document called the Constitution. It's not a recipe, though it does have the perfect ingredients for running a country. Let's travel back to when it all started. Picture this. It's the late 1700s. The American colonies have just said, bye-bye, Britain. They didn't want a king bossing them around anymore, especially not one who taxed their tea. So what did they do? They got together to build something new, a government by the people, for the people, and filled with checks. But no credit cards. They wanted to make sure no one person had all the power, not even the president. That's where the idea of 3 branches of government comes in. Think of it like a sturdy stool. You need all 3 legs to stay balanced, or else the whole thing tips over like a clumsy llama on roller skates. So, what are these 3 branches? Let me branch out and explain. Let's start with the first branch, the legislative branch. This is the part of government that makes the laws. They take ideas, debates, and maybe a few cups of coffee, and turn them into actual rules for the country. This branch lives in the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. That's Capitol with an O-L, not like a capital letter or a capital city. Although those are pretty important too. The legislative branch is made up of 2 parts, just like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Only in this case, the jelly is more formal. We've got the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House has 435 members. That's a lot of lawmakers. Imagine trying to agree on pizza toppings with that many people. In the House, the more people your state has, the more representatives it gets. So, states like California have way more members than, say, Wyoming. The Senate is a little more equal opportunity. Every state gets exactly 2 senators. That means tiny Rhode Island has just as much Senate power as gigantic Texas. When someone wants to make a new law, it starts as a bill. Not the kind you get after ordering too much guacamole, though that's painful too. A bill has to be approved by both the House and the Senate. That means lots of debating, editing, voting, and sometimes arguing over commas. Seriously, lawmakers have had entire arguments about punctuation. If both the House and the Senate say yes, the bill goes to the president who can sign it into law, or send it back with a big no. That's called a veto, which is Latin for I forbid. Also known as the presidential version of no thanks. So the legislative branch is where laws are born, debated, shaped, and either passed or politely kicked to the recycling bin. And speaking of shaping laws, you wouldn't believe some of the ones that made it through. Like, did you know that in Arizona it's illegal for a donkey to sleep in a bathtub? Not kidding. Apparently it caused quite a flood once. Or that in Washington state, it's against the law to harass Bigfoot. That's right, even mythical creatures deserve legal protection. So now that we've made some laws and protected some Sasquatches, let's move on to the next branch of government. The one that gets to wear the fanciest suits and wave from airplanes. I'm talking about the executive branch. The executive branch is led by the President of the United States. You've probably heard of that person. They're on the news, in the history books, and sometimes in memes. But what does the president actually do? The president's main job is to make sure the laws passed by Congress are carried out. That's right. They don't write the laws, they enforce them. Think of the president like the captain of a giant ship. They don't build the ship, but they help steer it in the right direction. They also sign bills into law, or veto them, remember? It's like being the boss of a really big book club. And the president doesn't work alone. They have a group of helpers called the cabinet. No, not the kind with hinges and shelves. This cabinet is made up of advisors who each lead a department. We're talking about things like education, defense, health, and even transportation. Each of these cabinet members gives the president advice on their area of expertise. They're kind of like a superhero team, only instead of flying, they file a lot of paperwork. And here's something cool. The president also has the power to pardon people. That means they can officially forgive someone who broke a federal law. Though, sadly, they can't pardon you from your homework. The president is also the commander-in-chief of the military. That's a fancy way of saying they're in charge of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. But they can't declare war by themselves. Only Congress can do that. So while the president has a lot of power, there are still rules and limits. And that's on purpose. Remember, our founders didn't want another king. That's why we have the third branch, to keep everyone in check. Welcome to the third and final branch of the U.S. government, the judicial branch. This is where the laws get interpreted, which is a fancy word for figuring out what they really mean. The highest court in this branch is called the Supreme Court. No, not the place that serves super fancy ice cream sundaes, though now I want one. The Supreme Court is made up of 9 justices. They wear black robes, ask big questions, and make huge decisions, like whether a law is fair or whether it goes against the Constitution. And once the Supreme Court makes a decision, it's final. That's why they're called the highest court in the land. The judicial branch also includes other federal courts across the country. These judges handle cases big and small, from mail theft to major civil rights decisions. So now we've met all 3 branches. Let's see how they work together. It's time for checks and balances. This system makes sure that no branch becomes too powerful. They each keep an eye on the others, kind of like a rock, paper, scissors tournament that never ends. Let's review with your very own Build a Government Checklist. A rule-making branch, legislative a rule-enforcing branch, executive A, rule-interpreting branch, judicial A, way to balance power, checks and balances, and now, let's see what you remember with a quick quiz. Question 1, which branch makes the laws? Answer, the legislative branch. Question 2, who is in charge of the executive branch? Answer, the president. Question 3, what's the highest court in the U.S.? Answer, the Supreme Court. Question 4, what system keeps the branches in balance? Answer, checks and balances. You crushed it, civic scholars. So the next time someone asks, how does the U.S. government work? You can smile, adjust your imaginary bow tie, and say, with teamwork, rules, and a whole lot of balance. Until next time, I'm Professor Punzworth, reminding you that knowledge is power and government, well, it's 3 powers, actually.